January 28, 1986, Washington, D.C. The Rogers Commission hearing room. NASA engineers stand before Congress, presenting their analysis of why the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded 73 seconds after launch, killing 7 astronauts. The presentation is immaculate. Thermal dynamics calculations flash across screens, solid rocket booster joint rotation angles, material stress analyses, putty performance parameters under variable atmospheric conditions. The engineers have PhDs from MIT, decades of aerospace experience, security clearances that took years to obtain. Their credentials fill entire walls. The room of officials and scientists nods along, scribbling notes, following the complex equations. Then Richard Feynman, Nobel Prize-winning physicist, pulls a small piece of rubber and a glass of ice water from under the table. No warning, no preamble. He drops the rubber O-ring into the ice water. The room goes quiet, cameras zoom in. He waits exactly 10 seconds, pulls it out, squeezes it between his fingers. The rubber doesn't bounce back. It stays compressed, rigid, dead. Feynman looks at the camera and says, "I believe that has some significance for our problem." 10 seconds. A child science experiment. Months of expert testimony destroyed. But what he did in that moment wasn't about the Challenger disaster. It revealed a systematic method for exposing fake expertise that works in any field, with anyone, at any time. A toolkit that destroys the illusion of knowledge instantly. The reason why changes everything about who you trust and why. Society trains us from childhood to worship credentials. The person with the degree knows more. The person with the title deserves respect. The person with the impressive job must be competent. We learn this in school, reinforce it in corporate environments, and carry it into every interaction where someone presents themselves as an expert. This creates a catastrophic blind spot. Because credentials prove you passed institutional tests. They prove you navigated bureaucratic requirements. They prove you can memorize information and repeat it on command. But credentials prove absolutely nothing about whether you understand reality. The NASA engineers at the Rogers Commission had impeccable credentials, aerospace engineering degrees from top universities, years of experience at the world's premier space agency, published research papers, security clearances, awards. They presented thermal expansion coefficients, complex material science data, engineering specifications that would take hours to verify. Feynman had a different question. Does the rubber work in the cold? He didn't care about their degrees. He didn't need to verify their equations. He wanted to see physical evidence with his own eyes. He wanted to watch the phenomenon happen in real time. This created a problem. Because the moment you demand simple physical demonstration, fake expertise collapses immediately. The pattern appears everywhere. Your LinkedIn feed full of thought leaders with impressive job histories who can't explain basic concepts. TED speakers with 19-minute presentations that sound profound but contain zero actionable truth. Business consultants with frameworks that repackage common sense using expensive jargon. Wellness gurus with credentials who make claims that contradict each other monthly. Impressive delivery, confident tone, complex language that sounds intelligent. But can they show you the phenomenon? Can they demonstrate it simply? Can they admit what they don't know? Feynman built a systematic toolkit for answering these questions. To understand how it works, we need to see what he actually did when confronting experts who didn't understand their own field. The Challenger investigation began weeks before that televised moment. February 1986. Feynman joins the Rogers Commission, travels to NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama. The engineers present their analysis, joint rotation dynamics, O-ring compression behavior, zinc chromate primer adhesion coefficients under thermal stress. Feynman sits in the back, taking notes in his peculiar style, not writing down their conclusions, but writing down his own questions. During a break, he approaches the NASA managers. His question, documented in the Rogers Commission report, what happens to the O-rings when they get cold? They explain. Thermal contraction rates in elastomer compounds, temperature-dependent material science specifications, engineering tolerances within acceptable parameters. Feynman asks, "Can I see one?" They look confused but provide an O-ring sample from the solid rocket booster. Standard procedure. Feynman holds it, examines it, squeezes it at room temperature, then asks, "Can I get some ice water?" The managers exchange glances. This isn't standard procedure. Feynman walks to the cafeteria, gets his own glass of ice water, returns to the conference room. February 11th, 1986, the televised hearing. NASA officials mid-testimony explaining their findings. Feynman interrupts, pulls out the O-ring, drops it into the ice water he brought with him, waits while cameras capture the moment, removes it, squeezes it. The rubber stays compressed, doesn't return to its original shape, has lost its elasticity. As he later wrote in, "What do you care what other people think?" I took the model and squeezed it, and sure enough, that was it. No equations, no thermodynamics models, no aerospace credentials needed. Just reality demonstrating itself. The cognitive shift Feynman made reveals the first principle of his fake expert detection system. If someone cannot show you the phenomenon directly in simple physical terms, they might not understand it themselves. Fake experts rely on abstraction because concrete demonstration exposes gaps in understanding. Real experts can always reduce complexity to observable physical reality. They can show you the thing happening. Feynman's mental model operated on a fundamental assumption. Nature doesn't care about your theories, your credentials, or your elegant mathematical models. What does the actual object do under actual conditions? That's the only question that matters. While NASA hid behind institutional authority and complex presentations, Feynman asked the question a curious child would ask. What happens if it gets cold? Then he tested it, publicly, undeniably. This wasn't about being contrarian. This was about demanding that expertise prove itself through physical demonstration, not through impressive-sounding explanations. When your marketing agency presents their strategy using terms like omni-channel synergy optimization and AI-enhanced consumer journey mapping, ask them to show you the last campaign results in a simple spreadsheet. Dates, metrics, costs, conversions. If they can't produce this immediately, you're dealing with sophisticated language covering for uncertain results. When a financial advisor explains their approach using algorithmic hedging strategies with machine learning, portfolio rebalancing, asked to see their personal investment returns over the past 5 years. Real money, real results. If they hesitate or deflect to theoretical models, you've found someone who can explain investing, but perhaps cannot do it. When a business consultant offers paradigm-shifting transformation and frameworks leveraging agile methodologies, ask which specific company implemented this framework and what the measurable before and after numbers were. Revenue, retention, productivity. Concrete metrics. If they provide case studies full of vague success language instead of hard data, they're selling fog. The moment someone cannot demonstrate simply, you've identified fake expertise. But Feynman's system went deeper. 3 years before Challenger, decades before his Nobel Prize, he encountered a different form of fake expertise that revealed a second principle. Centro, Brasileiro de Pesquisas Físicas, Rio de Janeiro. Feynman spends 10 months teaching physics to Brazilian university students. The students are impressive. They memorize formulas perfectly. They ace every examination. They solve complex differential equations. They can recite principles of electromagnetism, thermodynamics, quantum mechanics. Feynman watches them succeed by every traditional metric. Then he notices something disturbing. He asks a student, "What is Brewster's angle?" The student responds immediately, perfectly. It's the angle at which light reflected from a surface is completely polarized. Textbook definition. Exactly correct. Feynman asks, "Have you ever seen this phenomenon?" The student looks confused, searches for the answer in his memory. Can't find it. Feynman points to the bay outside the classroom window. Look at the water. At what angle is the reflection brightest? That's Brewster's angle. You've seen it your entire life every time you look at water or glass, but you never connected the formula to the physical reality you observe daily. As Feynman describes in Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman, after a lot of investigation, I finally figured out that the students had memorized everything, but they didn't know what anything meant. They could pass examinations, they could learn all this material and not know anything at all. The student had the credential, passing grades, had the knowledge, correct definitions, but couldn't recognize the phenomenon in the world around him. The formula existed in his mind as disconnected information, not as a description of observable reality. This revealed Feynman's second principle. Fake experts can repeat information perfectly. Real experts can translate the same concept multiple ways and show you where it manifests in physical reality. The cognitive pattern distinguishes memorization from understanding. Memorizers have one path, question to memorized answer. Understanders have multiple paths. The concept connects to reality, to analogies in different fields, to predictions about what happens when variables change, to physical demonstrations, to simple explanations using everyday language. Feynman's test operated systematically. Can you explain this without using technical terminology? Can you show me where this happens in the observable world? Can you predict what changes if I modify one variable? Can you connect this principle to something I already understand? If the answer to any of these is no, you're encountering sophisticated memorization presenting itself as expertise. When your doctor diagnoses a condition, ask them to explain what's physically happening inside your body, using an analogy to something you understand. Real doctors can do this instantly. They understand the biological mechanism deeply enough to translate it. Doctors who can only repeat medical terminology might be following diagnostic protocols without understanding the underlying biology. When a software developer explains their solution, ask them to show you what the code actually does, step by step, in plain language. Developers who truly understand their code can translate it to human logic. Developers who copy-paste it from Stack Overflow can only point to the code itself. When a social media marketing expert presents their strategy, ask them to explain why it works using basic human psychology, not industry jargon. Real experts understand the psychological mechanisms driving engagement. Fake experts know the platform features, but not why humans respond to them. The ability to translate between abstraction and reality, to explain concepts multiple ways, to show physical manifestations, this separates understanding from memorization. But Feynman discovered something even more insidious, a form of fake expertise that combined credentials, publications, institutional authority, and sophisticated language while containing almost zero actual knowledge. June 1974. Caltech. Commencement ceremony. Feynman delivers the graduation address. The speech becomes legendary. Cargo, cult, science. The title references South Pacific Islanders who built fake airplane landing strips after World War II. They carved runways into jungle clearings, built control towers from bamboo, wore wooden headphones. They copied every visible form of an airport, hoping cargo planes would return with supplies. The planes never came. Feynman's thesis: they follow all the apparent precepts and forms of scientific investigation, but they're missing something essential. Then he turns this accusation on modern academia, psychology departments, educational research, social sciences, fields full of credentialed PhDs, peer-reviewed publications, university appointments, conference presentations, research grants. His charge, documented in the published speech: these fields use scientific language but lack scientific integrity. They cherry-pick data supporting their hypotheses. They don't publish negative results. They ignore contradictory evidence. They mistake correlation for causation. They design experiments that cannot fail to confirm their assumptions. They have the form of science, the credentials, the publications, the institutional authority, but they're missing intellectual honesty. Feynman says, the first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. This reveals his third principle. Complex jargon often camouflages ignorance, not sophistication. The cognitive pattern operates predictably. The more uncertain someone feels about their knowledge, the more complex their language becomes. Jargon serves as defensive armor. If you don't understand what they're saying, you can't challenge whether they're right. Real experts simplify because they understand the core mechanism clearly enough to strip away unnecessary complexity. Fake experts complexify because they're hiding, consciously or unconsciously, that they don't fully grasp the fundamentals. When a crypto influencer cannot explain blockchain technology without saying, decentralized, trustless, immutable ledger paradigm, leveraging cryptographic consensus mechanisms, they probably don't understand it well enough to teach it to a curious teenager. When a leadership coach uses phrases like synergistic collaboration frameworks optimizing human capital throughput instead of helping people work together more effectively, they're selling expensive fog. When a nutritionist cannot explain their dietary recommendations without terms like metabolic optimization through macronutrient periodization and circadian rhythm alignment, ask yourself, are they understanding something complex or covering for something simple they've overcomplicated? But Feynman's fourth principle cuts even deeper than detecting jargon. It exposes the ultimate test of fake expertise. In the Cargo Cult Science speech, Feynman gives specific examples. Educational psychology, papers about teaching methods that measure student engagement and participation metrics, but never measure whether students actually learned anything. The papers get published, the researchers get tenure, the methods get implemented in schools, but nobody asks, did test scores improve? Can students apply the knowledge? Do they remember it a year later? The researchers avoid these questions because the answers might disprove their theories. Feynman's conclusion: we have learned from much experience that all philosophical intuitions about what nature is going to do fail. Translation: your elegant theories, your impressive credentials, your institutional authority, nature doesn't care. Reality doesn't negotiate. Either your model predicts observable outcomes, or it doesn't. This reveals the fourth principle. Real experts constantly admit limitations and uncertainties. Fake experts never acknowledge what they don't know. Intellectual honesty requires saying, I don't know, regularly. Requires admitting when evidence contradicts your position. Requires changing your mind publicly when proven wrong. Requires acknowledging the limits of current understanding. Fake experts never do this. They cannot afford to. Their authority depends on appearing omniscient within their domain. Admitting uncertainty threatens their credibility, but actual competence operates oppositely. The more you understand a field, the more you recognize how much remains unknown, how many variables remain unmeasured, how many mechanisms remain poorly understood. When a cryptocurrency expert cannot admit we don't fully understand the long-term economic implications of deflationary monetary policy, they're lying through omission. When a leadership consultant cannot acknowledge some personality types respond poorly to this framework and we're not sure why, they are pretending certainty where none exists. When a health influencer never says, the research on this is conflicting and we need better studies, they're choosing authority over honesty. Real experts say, I don't know, constantly. They point out contradictory evidence. They acknowledge competing theories. They admit where their model breaks down. This isn't weakness. This is the only intellectually honest position when dealing with complex systems that exceed current understanding. When you combine Feynman's four principles, you get a systematic toolkit that works in any field, with any claimed expert, in any context. First, demand physical evidence. Show me the actual phenomenon, not your description of it. Second, test understanding through translation. Explain it differently. Show me where this appears in observable reality. Connect it to something I already understand. Third, identify jargon as potential camouflage. Can you say this in simple language? If not, why not? Fourth, require intellectual honesty. What don't you know? What evidence contradicts your position? What are the limitations of this approach? This is why Feynman exposed NASA's institutional failure, destroyed cargo cult science, and revolutionized physics education. But more importantly, this reveals something uncomfortable about how modern society manufactures authority. We've built entire industries around credentialed expertise that cannot pass these simple tests. Business consultants who've never built businesses. Leadership coaches who've never led organizations. Financial advisors who underperform index funds. Education experts whose students don't learn. Health professionals who cannot demonstrate measurable outcomes. They have the credentials, the titles, the institutional backing, the impressive presentations, but they cannot show you the phenomenon simply. cannot explain it multiple ways, cannot simplify their language, cannot admit uncertainty. Feynman had a Nobel Prize, the ultimate credential in physics. Yet, he spent his life demonstrating that credentials prove nothing about understanding reality. As he said in his Nobel lecture, the thing that doesn't fit is the most interesting. The thing that doesn't fit in our society. We've constructed massive industries that reward the appearance of expertise over actual competence, that mistake complexity for sophistication, that confuse credentials with understanding. You don't need a physics degree to use Feynman's Toolkit. You don't need to be a genius. You need to stop accepting institutional authority as proof of knowledge. You need to stop letting jargon intimidate you into submission. You need to demand that expertise prove itself through observable reality, not through impressive-sounding abstractions. You need to pull out the equivalent of ice water and a rubber O-ring in every field you encounter. Ask the simple question. Demand the physical test. Watch what happens. Feynman's confrontations with fake expertise reveal something most people never consider. The vast majority of fields reward navigating institutions successfully, not understanding reality accurately. Credentials, publications, conference invitations, prestigious appointments, these prove you can play the academic or corporate game. They don't prove you can see clearly. The critical thinking toolkit he demonstrated isn't about being skeptical of everything. It's about being systematic in distinguishing between people who understand physical reality and people who've memorized impressive-sounding descriptions of reality. Show me. Explain differently. Simplify. Admit uncertainty. 4 tests. Every fake expert fails at least one, usually all 4. But this detection system was just the foundation. Feynman used another technique that most people get completely wrong: how he actually learned complex topics from scratch without relying on experts at all. That system, the one that let him rebuild quantum electrodynamics from first principles while others copied textbooks, operates on logic that destroys everything universities teach about learning. The method remains hidden in plain sight, visible only to those who know where to look.